right, and welcome back to another episode about the dual quantizer, the Doepfer A156. I'm Raul. This time around, we're going to be looking at a few more features of the dual quantizer. If you joined us in some of the previous videos, like the first one, for instance, we talked about kind of a lay of the land, so to speak, kind of giving you an overview of what all the ports on here are intended for, and then followed that up with a little bit of a demonstration of basic waveforms such as triangle sine, saw, and so forth. And then in the last segment of videos, we actually went into a little more detail into Quantizer 2, looking at more specifically the major minor modes, the scale, chord, and quint modes, and then what it sounds like when you add the 7th and the 6th. But there's a few more features that we haven't looked at yet. For instance, the trigger in, we have not looked at that yet, and trigger out. And then also the transpose CV in and 2. Plus there's a couple other things that I think might be useful to demonstrate. So I actually enlisted the assistance here of the Doepfer A140 envelope generator, because up until now we've heard pretty much straight waveforms going into the dual quantizer. But what about another voltage type source, for instance, an envelope? So I wanted you to hear what that's actually going to sound like going into our dual quantizer. And then after that, we'll continue looking at some of the other features. So let's start off with that. I'm going to plug, let's see, the output of my envelope into my dual quantizer. And I'm just going to go straight in this time because the envelope actually goes in the positive direction. So I'm not going to need to add any offset. I mean, I could if I wanted to, but I don't need to because I'm not going to wind up with a sustained tone as I did with the waveforms. So I'm just going to patch that straight into there. I'm going to go into my all mode, and I'm going to actually get out of chord mode and just go into scale mode. Although in all mode, I don't really have to do that because those two settings are kind of disabled anyway since I'm doing all the tones. And then I'm going to go straight out into my oscillator. But let's set up our patch so that way we have a sound material to go in. And here we go. I'm going to patch this in to audio in 1. There we go. And then I'm going to take my triangle wave and go into my second input there. So I have my sound material. And so the last thing I need to do is actually just patch my CV out into my pitch. But before I do that, I do want to let you know that my keyboard is going to actually be triggering the envelope. And one other thing to note about that, the only reason I'm bringing it up is that the pitch is actually set up to trigger the pitch of the VCO as well. So whatever fundamental I'm pressing on the keyboard, it's going to be changing the oscillator's pitch as well, at least the fundamental pitch of it. You'll still hear the sort of the scale-like properties of it. So here we go, patching CV out into CV in 1. And we have no sound yet because I haven't triggered the envelope yet. And I'm just going to start in the low setting here. And you'll know when I've hit a note because the light is going to light up since the envelope is plugged into the CV gate bus of the G6 case that I'm actually working in. So here we go. I'm going to hit a key, and then you should start to hear whatever the control voltage is here on the envelope generator go right into the quantizer and then be converted to notes and trigger the oscillator. So here we go. And that one's pretty fast. Now if I hold it down, I can hit my sustain tone. So right there I'm at the sustain because I'm holding down the key, as you can see right there, and when I let go. So I can bring up my attack. Adjust my settings. If I bring my release up, I should get a slightly different sound as it returns to the fundamental. Okay, so that's in the low setting. Let's try the medium setting. I think I was getting some better results with that. So let's take a listen. And you can note from the brightness of the light what point of the envelope it's in. So when I press it down immediately, it turns red. When it gets to the sustain level, and then as it drops, it gets lower and lower. So it takes a little bit to get to the red because my attack time is a little bit above the midway range. So if I were to bring that down, it would just immediately start. Here we go. So then I get a more descending tone. Very similar to what we saw when we had the falling form of a saw, except I have a little bit more control over the length of the note, or of the series of notes, I should say. There we go. There we go, I just hit it again. So I'm hitting it several times. Whenever you see the light initially start, that means that I've hit the note. So this is the envelope generator being triggered into the Quantizer in the medium setting. We kind of checked out the low setting, but it was fairly short, so only good for short little bursts. And now we've looked at it in the middle setting, or the medium setting. So let's take a listen over in the high setting. So I just switched it over, and let me go ahead and trigger it. That may take a while for it to start producing the descend there, especially since my release is all the way up. Let me bring that down a little bit. There it goes. So since we're in scale mode, that's basically what we're hearing. We continue to hear a scale. It's just a slightly different version of the scale every single time. So if I bring my decay time down a little bit, maybe sustain up, let's have a listen to that. Just trying to keep it from going too long, because if you know a little bit about the A140, in the high setting, your envelope can actually take up to, I think, a couple of minutes to cycle. So may still have its place as being used as a source for creating notes. For me personally, at least listening to it now, I don't know how much I would actually use it in the high setting. I kind of preferred, at least today anyway, the medium setting, but definitely can still happen. And the purpose of this is not to sort of make you lean one way or the other. It's just to kind of demonstrate that this dual quantizer can be used for various types of CV sources that are in the low frequency range. So we did waveforms, and now we're doing envelope. Okay, I'm going to go back to the medium setting and then maybe just do a couple more of these, and then we'll jump into the trigger demonstration. There we go. And again, every time I hit the key, you see the light. So you can use this to create your own kind of little glissandi effects if you want to. Always coming back to the fundamental pitch of your oscillator. there you go. A140. Take a bow, if you will, A140. All right. So we've done the A140 envelope generator going into the quantizer. Let me actually just unpatch my signal here, and then I'll kind of discuss a little bit about what we're going to do next. In the next one, we're going to actually look at the trigger in, because that's something we haven't done yet. And so we're going to be using probably, let's see, the two LFOs again. So in order to do that, let me get my sound source back, and we'll jump right in. So got that plugged in, getting my sound source going. Let's see. So I'm going to trigger the quantizer at a rate of this LFO. So I'm going to have this triggering the rate of when this is going to be picking up notes at the CV out. And this should be fairly noticeable. So I'm going to plug that in. We're not sending CV voltage into our quantizer yet. That's why we haven't heard anything yet. So let's get some voltages going in. Let's just do a sine wave to start out with, and then patch it into CV in. There we go. We got that. So there's one note. There's another note. So there you go. Every time this receives a trigger, it's going to grab a new tone. So if I bring the frequency of this up, we'll hear notes more frequently. And we have that kind of sustained effect going on, but that's because, we haven't inserted the offset in here. So let's actually fix that. So we're going to unpatch that, go into our input over here, go out from there. And I think my settings should still be such that they will work, so I'm just going to patch it in. Frequency's all the way up. So this is telling it to grab a note every time it receives a pulse from this module over here. Now if I unpatch that, you'll hear just continuous notes being output from here. So let's unpatch that, just so we hear what that sounds like. So that's without the trigger in, and then let's hear it with the trigger in. See, it's more kind of etched. More rhythmic. If I unpatch it again, we'll hear the continuous version. Sort of like you're sliding up the notes on a keyboard. And bring the frequency down a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to patch that in there so we can hear it again. So you should be able to hear the difference there. I'm not going to go through all the waveforms, but let's take a listen to the triangle wave. Maybe slow it down a little bit. And let's compare that to without the trigger in. So you can kind of hear what that's actually doing is it's kind of limiting when it happens, and it's according to a certain frequency determined by whatever input you have going in there. Now the input does and should be a gate or a pulse of some sort, something rhythmic, so that way it will then be musical and rhythmically precise with whatever sequence you're feeding it into. Okay? So that is the trigger in. Now the trigger out, as we talked about before, is basically just a mult. I'm not actually going to demonstrate that. Well, no, I take that back. You know, I could actually do just a little demonstration of it. So our frequency here, I wasn't going to demonstrate it because I didn't think I had the modules appropriate to do it, but I actually do have it. So I'm going to take the trigger out from here, and then I'm going to patch it into the gate over here. Now we're not going to hear any reflecting sound from that, but what we should see is the light being triggered, or my envelope being triggered every time it receives the pulse coming out from the trigger out. So here we go. So there you are, trigger out. And again, that's just basically a mult. So if I speed this up, you can see that that's going a little faster. And it's determined by the frequency of this. Cool. Nice little surprise, even for me. So let me get my trigger out and unpatch that. So that is our demonstration of trigger out.